So let me welcome you here at the venue of Abletech/AddressFinder. We are sisters companies, which means AddressFinder is a product-based company, and Abletech is a contracting part of the basically same business, same leadership, same people, same events, same spaces. So before we start, just quick health and safety information. In case of a fire, that's the fire door. If you are towards the back of the office, you just go down the stairs you came in. If there's an earthquake, duck, don't roll, just cover your head and just wait for the earthquake to pass. If the earthquake is quite long or strong that you can't stand up, we would walk up the street past Briscoe's up to the elevated position.
We stay in the building now.
We stand in the building now.
Yeah, same for synonyms.
So I'll just repeat just in case the mic didn't pick it up. We stayed in the building and just wait for helicopters to pick us up or something. But also in case of fire, if you go down, the meeting point is the Briscoe's car park. So we'll just all group there. Oh, yeah, toilets. Yeah, toilets are up the stairs and down the stairs as well. Lee has a key to let, or she'll be handling the doors because they might lock, so she'll let you out. And yeah, I think that's all. Cool. Yeah. So
I'll let
Jordan. Okay, go.
So yeah, I guess the plan for tonight is Nahum's got a first talk about why I moved on from Rails, which should be really interesting, and then Erik's doing one on security audits, which is cool. And then we've got an AddressFinder Q&A. So when you RSVP to the meetup, you put in some questions, and we'll try and address those, as well as just any other questions you've got about AddressFinder that hopefully Erik will be able to answer. We'll go through some quick job openings in the end if anyone's hiring, and then hopefully it should be all perfectly timed for pizza. But if it arrives early or whatever, maybe we'll have a pizza break and then come back to some of the other things. But hopefully it all work smoothly. So yeah, I think just it's your talk, man.
Okay.
I'll stop. Oh, it's Alex.
Just realised like an awesome perk. I get to go first. So there's a thingy, fire, but not an earthquake. At least I feel like you one laugh out of that, but not. So this is my first time using Google SlideShare because I'm using my work branded stuff. It started not changing slides up there, but it did here when I was practicing last night. So do let you know if I'm talking about bollocks compared to what's up there. While I moved on from Rails, I was giving a practice about this practice the other night, and my wife said, maybe you should call it, well, moving on from Rails is actually what it was on the meetup one. And it's like, there's a difference in the meaning there, and I'm not going, no, this isn't very good, I'm going to move away from it. Well, move on from it, I'm just moving away. It's still a completely valid option, just not for me. And so, but a better way to put it is that. So, who am I? Some of you might know me, some of you might not. On my reading glasses, so I can't see who most of you are anyway. Helps with being nervous. It's like going at home. I'm Nahum. I've been ratting around the web startup scene here in Wellington since mid-2000s, when I've been doing Rails for most of that. I ran this user group for over a decade. So I handed it over when I just didn't have the time for it a little while ago. And then the pandemic happened and killed it. And so some new folks are trying to get it back up and going again, which is really awesome. So I said I'd do a talk about 4 months ago. I then spent 4 months procrastinating about what I do want to talk about. So yeah. So a little bit about branded slides. I don't normally do this. If you see me give a presentation before, I've given a few to meetups. I tend not to. I like to keep my professional persona separate from my work one. Except I kind of like my work and I don't mind intermingling it a bit. I've spent the last 4 years restoring a hillside out in the Wairarapa, planting trees and stuff. And then Vibrant Planet approached me to come and work for them as their first product engineering hire. And we're about managing and restoring forests in California to help prevent them burning down as much. And so that was a massive overlap in my personal interests. So, and it's turned out to be a really fun job. So, yeah. So I don't normally do random slides. That's the most pushy I'm going to get with regards to work. But it's also why I'm using Google Sheets for the first time, because that's where the template was. So most of the colleagues are based overseas. So anyway, I moved on from Rails. So this is a deeply personal talk. I'm slightly nervous about giving it. It's also, I threw my talk away about 2 days ago and started again when I realized that my talk was rubbish. So it's a little bit different to what the meetup description is. And so I'm slightly nervous about that, but we'll see how that goes. It's also a little bit rough, so hopefully it'll be good. And my slides might be the wrong order, or I remember differently. So what this talk is not about is, there's no such thing as Ruby is better than Elixir, and Elixir is better than Ruby, or TypeScript is better than JavaScript, or JavaScript is better than TypeScript. It's all a personal choice. Everybody's different. This is the most technical I'm probably going to get with regards to things like that in this talk. And the other thing about the slides is you can't see your commenter, your what do you call them?
Speaker notes.
Speaker notes. I know, it's like, that's an excellent feature. I Googled for that, and found lots of other people Googling about that. So most of my bullet points are in the speaker notes. Yeah, it really is a personal choice. And I kind of, it's sort of, that's partly what this talk is about. It sort of ends up being quite personal. Pretty much, I'm still learning. You're not going to come away from this going, wow, this is more of me just like thinking things through and going, huh, that's interesting. I wonder if people might find, at least someone here might find that interesting. So I'll do a talk on that. Now, I've been using Elixir full time since pretty much the beginning of the year, mostly. If any of my colleagues are watching this, they shouldn't be surprised by me saying that. I convinced them all to use Elixir once they understood what I was talking about with my accent. So what is this talk about then? So I spent a lot of my time over the last 4 months planting trees, going through that type of thing, going, why have I moved away from Rails to Elixir? And then it's sort of like, why not Ruby? It was like, why Ruby? And so I kind of couldn't answer most of those questions, and it was kind of annoyed me a lot. And because I have a former boss who liked to ask the 5 whys, which is a known thing. And he got really annoying in a nice way by just constantly going, why? And I realized I was doing that to myself. So I've actually spent a lot of time trying to figure out, why have I moved on from Rails? So I've been thinking about it a lot. And so I decided to stop thinking about it just in the silo of Ruby and Elixir, but more the greater, how do I get to Ruby? So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. And it's a trajectory, is probably the best way to put that. And kind of makes sense when you step back and look at it. And then I'm going to try and answer 3 questions. The first one's a tongue twister for me. I haven't changed it. Why do I think what I liked about working on changed? What is interesting about my current work, and why is Elixir for me? Not why is Elixir better, because it's not. It's like, why is it for me? We'll put another way, let me tell you what I learned about myself, which is why this is personal, rather than just some TED talk, let me show you some fancy code. And yeah, thinking about why we do what we, thinking about what we do and why we do it. Somebody might see something reflected in what I'm talking about here themselves, and they might go away about it. Yeah, and that might be a better title, but anyway. So how I got here, I'm not going to go over this point by point, but I initially started by going, right, what are all the different problem domains I've worked on? So I'm basically describing to you my source data for this talk. Different areas I've worked on, deliberately alphabetical. I've worked out, I have had a little bit, probably about 18 or a little bit more employed jobs over my career so far. It doesn't include contracting, where I've done a lot of little bespoke things and that type of thing. More than half of them have been startups. So fast failing startups. So a number of jobs have been like a year. It's like work like really hard for a year and then it's like, it didn't work, but I learned a lot of stuff. And that enabled me to get my next job and that type of thing. So I've worked in a broad range of areas. Game dev and payroll are quite two different ends of the spectrum. So continuing to add to my source data, this is sort of chronological in terms of my language stack that I've been using over the years. So I started out mid-early 90s doing C and C++, add-ons to bulletin board systems, or plugins, or programs. But my first proper job was in a language called Clipper, which was a DOS-based system with a database behind it, and that's my first real exposure to databases. A lot of Clipper folks transitioned to Delphi when it came out in 94, 95 for Windows development, Windows 3.1. But when I started learning Ruby, it felt familiar to me because it's very similar to Clipper. Clipper is what it is, I'm not sure, didn't look that up actually, because it's been around since the late 80s, I think, is a compiled, mutable, dynamically typed language. You compile up a binary and you chip it on floppy disk to your customers, and it had to work. But it has those common elements with Ruby. The compiler also included the compiler in your binary when you made your app. So you could assemble code on the fly and pass it around as variables and arbitrarily execute it. It was good fun. So Ruby was like, oh, this is really familiar with me. So that's probably why I stuck with Ruby for a long time, because I really enjoyed using it, and that enjoyment is a key point here. So you'll notice there's no Java on here. There is no .NET on here. I have no idea how to do any of those two things. TypeScript is briefly on here, and I have flitted away from it again. So that's sort of the only Microsoft stack type thing that I've done. I briefly got Elixir in there, and then I have gone away to other things, and then come back, and now I'm full-time on Elixir. And so that's my language stack. Definitely not going through this, but I tried, most of my jobs, I've tried to use common language about what I was doing in the job so I could compare them. Is there a trend? And I thought there was a trend, and then I was wrong about what that trend was. But all jobs have fancy crud. Some of my jobs, that's kind of all it was, and that was really boring, so I kind of moved on those really quickly. But the two things that sort of, apart from the word data, that sort of stood out to me was real time and processing. And I thought there was a bit of a trend happening there in terms of my first proper job was doing payroll stuff, so it was like overnight processing, payments clicks, go home, hope it's finished in the morning. And I've tried to approach speeding that up from different avenues. And then in terms of parallelizing it, then it's like, well, do we just do less to make it faster so it's a more improved UX? The web UX started into my vocabulary when I did web development here in Wellington. And that was kind of a bit of a change in sort of how I started approaching stuff. Kind of change the shape of things to improve the UX, I make it faster, which could be shape of the data or the code. And then where I am now is like, we've got the tooling, we've got the hardware, and we've got the language, I guess, and the free-for-all to try doing everything all at once. And so that's kind of the trend I thought I was looking at. But once I was sort of looking through it a lot, I realized, nah, I'm just chasing positive feedback loops. I want to chuck something out there that someone goes, hey, that's really awesome, good work. And it turns out I do that a lot, and that's a really huge motivator for me. And something like UX is a means to an end. I can improve through good UX design. I can improve somebody's user experience and get a good positive feedback loop. There's one place I worked. It took half my career before I actually had users that actually enjoyed the product I worked on. And once that happened, that was like, wow, that's just fantastic. But also speed of response for the website is UX. It's like someone uploads a file that needs to be processed, be it like a design file in SVG or a shape file and that type of thing that we've got to do all the processing. The faster that happens, the quicker the user can move on and do the next thing. And so that speed is also a user experience. And yeah, and sort of I figured out that, and particularly with speed improvement, for me, well, this is not me declaring I'm a massive, awesome person at performance optimization. I just enjoy doing it. And I found the bang for buck, or the ratio of how much effort I put in to the feedback loop I get is the best ratio I can get, it turns out. So this is a bit of a revelation for me. So what do I think, what I like working on change? I'm not certain what I like working on change. It's just what I was trying to achieve didn't change. How I was trying to achieve it has changed. And as I said, it's sort of new tooling libraries are available, and I'm still chasing the same feedback loops from people and that type of thing. And I'm constantly iterating on how to solve problems. I get really bored if I'm doing the same thing over and over again. Hence the comment about TensorPro. So changing technology stacks, changing tooling is something that I do quite a lot. But another way to think about UX is users can be able to code it. Data can be variables in code. Data can be the structure of code and of data. And code can be data. And so at least one of those things on the list of types of work I've done is not actually developing a product for people. It's working on the product release pipeline and trying to automate it, improve it, and make it quicker and easier to use. And I got, thinking back, I got good feedback loop from that. I like to take a whole lot of code and make it easier for other people to use, and maybe make it execute faster, better documentation, makes it easier to use, and that type of thing. So I think commonly when people say UX, they do think user experience and how easy is it for me going to the banking website to figure out how to open a bank account. But no, everybody is a user and everybody has an experience. So it's about trying to improve that. So what is interesting about my current work? So putting aside the business domain, which I forgot to explain. So we take, so this is where the feedback loop comes into it. No, so we take gobs of data, we have fancy scientists process that, we have machine learning, and then we, using machine learning and so forth, we are advising foresters and people who own forests and have interest in forests in California on how to look after them so they don't burn down as fast. And so that process of coming up with a treatment plan for an area of the forest normally takes months. And so we've come in and used our fancy tech, and it takes minutes. And they're just like, huh. And so we're not doing to the same level of detail that a person is doing over several months, but we're getting them a lot of the way there. And then they can do that fine stuff that someone with experience knows that a computer can't. And so for me, that's like massive untapped feedback loop potential, because my first effort has gotten massive gains in performance. And so these people, instead of waiting months, and it's like, oh, it's a couple of minutes, sweet. Hey, that looks cool. I can start, and they can start iterating and improving their treatment plans. So treatments could be going into a large area of forest and thinning it. So any trees that are like this in the diameter, chop them down, send a helicopter, pull out stuff, get rid of lots of undergrowth. It's like 32 different treatment options. It's quite interesting. And so then there's the law of diminishing returns. As I keep on working on that, I get less of improvement for the same amount of effort. So one way to put this is I've jumped into a completely new industry where no one's done anything like this before. And I can just ride the rest of the way with awesome feedback loops. Basically, what's happening. We have a new code base. It's constantly evolving and being added to because it's a new code base with new tech. So there's lots of learning there. There's lots of constantly looking at code and understanding. Having learned a whole lot more, it's like sweep up, go back and improve that, so someone else can come in and benefit from the changes that I've made. So why is Elixir for me? And I like breaking down. So this is not a pitch for Elixir. This is just why it works for me. So I like breaking down complexity into multiple smaller parts. And I feel that something that's kind of built into how Elixir works is having lots of small moving parts that are simple and they interact with each other in a nice way. And so that's part of my process to making life better for me and for other people, is to take something complex and make it simple. And so the language itself lends you towards working that way. And once you've done that, Elixir makes it stupidly easy to parallelize it. So data processing. And pretty much like scratching the surface. And for me, in particular, it's a single language. So this is a screenshot from today on GitHub repo for our single app. The JavaScript is over-represented in the screenshot because we've got a whole lot of boilerplate to get material design to work. But it worked out. We've only got 3 files with business logic of JavaScript in it, and they're about 270 lines. And this is an interactive mapping app. So, and it's all server-side rendered with a thing called Live View, which is like Hotwire, I think. It's not, I can vaguely see I'm blurring. So yeah. So why I wanted to share this, and why should you care? So I figured out what motivates me, 30 odd years into my career. And it's not ultimately what I thought motivated me. I went through several iterations. There's more than one thing that motivates me, but this is an interesting thing for a talk, I thought. Over the years, I've managed staff, and I've made a conscious effort to try and figure out what motivates them. Because if I have a staff member that is unhappy, are they going to move on or whatever? So I'd rather people were happy and were doing something they enjoyed and were motivated. And so it's kind of ironic. I realized I've never actually looked at myself to figure out what motivates myself. And so I thought, well, maybe other people just have merely gone through their life without realizing why they were making particular decisions at a deep level. Hence why I think maybe you should care. Not that this is something that might motivate you to the extent that apparently it motivates me, but it's I think it's worth going and having that look. I have a litany of side projects that I've just discarded, and it's because I was the only person working on them, and I was the only person using them, and so there's no decent feedback loops, it turns out, and that is actually a rule that actually works for all my side projects that I don't work on anymore, and explained the one that was successful for a while because it was a game, and I reasonably quickly got people playing it, and they enjoyed it, and I set up a forum, and we chatted about it. They gave me suggestions and complaints about particular things, and there was this like excellent feedback loop happening, and it explains why I stayed in the job I was in at the time for as long as I did, because I had this positive support with the side project I was working on when I wasn't getting it from my day job, and it was sort of counterbalance that. I thought that was kind of interesting. But it's also, I haven't really got too far into my history in terms of why I've made particular decisions and what's motivated it, because there's no point, no benefit from that. But definitely going to take this into account, because I've had a couple of jobs where it's like, that was a stupid job to have picked, and I've moved on, and it's a waste of time for everybody. And in hindsight, it's like, yeah, I can probably figure out that by now. So it's a case of going, okay, I can, at some point I'm going to move on to the next job, and it's like, I have a better understanding of what makes me tick and what will cause me to like a job and do a better job. And I think that's a good thing. And so, yeah, what motivates you? I have an unrelated demo of a fun, fast thing I did. I don't know how I'm going for time. But yeah. Anybody want to? Unless there's questions about that, might be. Sorry, not the talk you were probably originally expecting, but
I have one.
yeah.
So the game and that feedback loop, what happened that you then eventually moved on?
I couldn't figure out how to make money from it. And that's what it. I think Nigel might have played it at his game. Yeah. Honestly, I couldn't figure out how to make money from it. And it kind of felt bad trying to make money from it for some reason. But yeah, it was a turn-based strategy game, and you did a turn a day. Everybody did turns in parallel type thing. So a game might take 2 months. That type of thing. 20 people in a game on a map. And I just couldn't figure out how to make money from that and cover my costs. That's like, why would that? It might have been a self-deprecation moment, but I couldn't figure out why would someone care enough to pay me a couple of bucks for this. And if it was a one-off cost, then it was going to be a pyramid scheme. I had to constantly find new people, or it was a regular cost, in which case, why would I regularly pay? Excuse me. It was going to have to be microtransactions, and when this was happening, that really wasn't a thing. And so the fee from like PayPal or something like that was just going to obliterate everything.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good. It's interesting because I have flirted with the idea of redoing it in Elixir as a way to learn Elixir, but I now have a good job at the moment where I'm busy learning Elixir. So yeah.
When it comes to, I guess, Elixir, and that's that gets a bit of insight.
Yeah, that's true.
Was great. Do you find it hard, I guess, from a technical leadership perspective, having as many people available to actually hire and as much uptake in the community? I mean, like I'm part of the Elixir Slack.
Yeah.
It's not exactly busy.
So people online didn't hear that. How's the talent pool for hiring from? Is probably the question. I haven't been, because we're still in the process of setting up the ability in New Zealand to properly hire people, which we're hoping to have sorted by the end of the year. And then we're going to figure out how many, if any, we hire in New Zealand. One of us, there's 4 being on the team. It's currently just me because we needed to automate our data processing pipeline. And so I'm holding down the fort at the moment, and my 3 colleagues are busy automating all that stuff and wowing our scientists. 2 of those come from a big American box tech company, React background, and this is their first Elixir experience, and they just took to it. The other one has similar experience to myself with Rails and a little bit of Elixir, and exactly what it's used for. And so I don't think the talent pool is limited to people that already know Elixir. When we hire people, we're not looking for people that know Elixir. We're looking for nice people that are fun to work with, that are interested in our mission. And so that's a lot of people. And we're very happy to teach because we're busy learning ourselves. So how am I going for timing? I forgot to start the timer thing.
I think you're good.
I'm all good.
That's probably fine.
Yeah. Well, in terms of positive feedback loop, I'm going to try and get one from you all today. This is our ad. This is running on a box at home over a WireGuard connection. So I'll shrink it as we work on here. So this is Tahoe National Forest, and this is the lower Tahoe Basin area. I was in the States a little while ago, meeting all my colleagues for the first time, having worked with them for a year, and I was here in Grass Valley, and we got a bit of tour of the forest by a forester who'd done a whole lot of treatment. So she completed that journey for me in terms of we had suggested, well, she didn't use our software, but she had suggested a treatment plan which and got funding for it and then applied it, which was thinning, getting a lot of undergrowth and setting up the area to deliberately burn it. And so we were there before the burn happened. So the idea is to stop flames getting to the canopy and then spreading. So it's okay to go along the ground, it turns out, and then all sorts of things. And so what we do is we have a whole lot of data, for instance, and this is, can't remember how many polygons this is. There's quite a few, but the more pinky it is, the more of a fire hazard that area is. And so this used to be this is live, pulled from a database, chucked up on screen. This is not we're using Mapbox, this is not a Mapbox layer. It is for the polygons, which you can sort of see. Try to draw out, here you go. And so it's static data, we're not doing any computation, but it's nice and quick. And we're driving this from Elixir in the back end with LiveView. We pushing it through, we're doing a quick query in the database and just streaming the data in batches through to the front end, intentionally setting every single polygon's color on screen. And so that's nothing startling or anything like that. But what our users do is I've deliberately selected the whole area because it's the biggest I can select at the moment. But normally they would select, say, a much smaller area that they were interested in, because this is 1.5 million acres. And so they would indicate what they're interested in. And so yeah, I'm not a salesperson. So they're interested in ensuring safety, protecting local wildlife and maybe recreational areas, and ensuring good quality water sources. Maybe that's a little bit important. So that's how important that is. That is all being calculated on the fly. We initially outsourced to just get a separate company to a proof of concept, and moving these sliders. The goal wasn't fastest can be awesome. It was like, does this idea work? And so the previous version of this product, the user come and hit sliders and click, tell me, or I forget what the button might have been generated. It would then go off to Amazon Batch and spend a while figuring out what I've just been doing on the fly. And so it was one great big script, and it did a whole lot of things, and then it would render the page again. And so I have broken that down into a whole lot of pieces. It's like, okay, I've moved a whole lot of it into Postgres and got Postgres to do a bunch of the heavy lifting for me, and it changing the layout of the data that I get back from it. Postgres can stream the results, so while it's still figuring it out, it started sending the initial results to you, and I've started batching that up and interacting in a completely different way to how we were originally doing it with Mapbox, and then starting to change the pixels on screen, which is you can actually see it doing that. Turning everything off, because is it dark or light area happen first? If you can see, it sort of goes dark and then light, and it's because of how we're ordering it. But we've got a complicated formula that does scoring. We've got more than one formula. I can see there's a change in our backlog that's like, do it a different way. And so we can't pre-render this. We can't use a tile server for this and just like get another tile set, because I've spent a lot of time and effort on minimizing how much data is actually sent to the browser. Because this has to work on a terrible 3D connection, a 3G connection in the middle of nowhere on someone's old hardware. And that's how some of our sales demos have been, as far as I can tell. And it works just fine. So that's caused bad problems at work as well. Bad problems in a nice way. Because suddenly our staff are able to do more than what they even dreamed they could do. Because you can upload really complicated shape files indicating what area of the map you're interested in, not just a square, but a really intricate edge, and it could be a multi-polygon. And we've got to work with that. And suddenly I enabled them to do more And so they started doing more, and they started breaking it because I had my example data I was working on of how they were going to use it wasn't as complicated as what they were doing. And so it was this race of them breaking it and then having to fix it before the sales demo with the thing that they're just breaking it with. But it's stabilized now. We have people just doing demos like I explained without even telling us that we're going to do it and telling us afterwards and saying, it worked great. It's like, sweet. I'm glad it worked great. They didn't have to worry about that happening. But yeah, the Chrome's got a throttling option. And so I basically spent a week with it set to the slow 3G option, just trying to get the websites working, basically. And yeah, suddenly it just worked for everybody. And it was really good. But that used to be run as a background job, and now it's live. I don't know if you can see much happening there, but yeah. So that's over a little WireGuard connection to my server at home at the moment. So I was going to try doing it on my phone, but yeah. No JavaScript, basically. So it's not that. Single language makes life a lot easier. I'm not knocking JavaScript.
Any questions about that? No.
Yeah, just a question about the other talk. So when you're sort of going through figuring out what sort of things you wanted to be doing, and then you got a job that's sort of aligned with that, was that a conscious thing, or is that something that sort of happened at the same time?
It's kind of just happened. It's realized, but now I can be conscious about it. Yeah, but it really explains why I've really enjoyed some jobs and not enjoyed other jobs at all. And I had no idea why. And half the time I put it down to just some of the people I was working with, or just the problem domain and that type of thing. I've tried a few jobs where I didn't care about tech stack, and the product was something I was like really awesome. I really believed in it, and that hasn't worked out for me. And I've tried the reverse, where it's been that's the best tech stack ever, which at the time was Rails, still is, and I didn't care about the product, and I had no passion for what I was doing. My only work was with other developers, and half the time it's just me or 2 or 3 other people. Companies I tend to work in tend to be less than 20 people all up. Because the more people there are, the easier it is for you to be drowned out. And that's probably the wrong way to put that. But also you get siloed into working in more narrowly focused areas rather than working across the entire product. And that's what I like about this. So with this product, I've done everything from all of the info right up to the stopping at HTML and CSS because I suck at that. But I work with a couple of people who that's their jam. So it's good. Cool.
Is there anything about Rails you miss?
So I like Ruby syntax better than Alexa syntax. Alexa, I have to aliasing all the freaking time. What the hell? Which is really is a little bit frustrating. I miss the immutability because I think that's an important feature of the language. I know a lot of people don't. It's moved away from that. And I've gone to a language that's completely immutable, but it's been designed into it from the beginning. So it's not this thing shoot and it's on. The language, it's a lot of Rubyists in the Alexa world. So if there's a really popular library in Ruby, it's likely there's an equivalent one being developed or has been developed in Alexa. The only thing we've suffered from is the UI framework. So particularly as we've gone with live view, we ended up picking material design because there was nothing for us to pick that was we could just install a library and just start dropping components on the screen. So we ended up building our own component library for material design because that's the design language our designer wanted to use. But we sort of got to we even have our own storybook section on our website. in our backend admin section to help build a bunch of our screens. But we're kind of stopped at a particular point with that framework development because it's good enough. And we're waiting basically for the community to resolve down onto a particular way of doing component libraries. And then some people to build a component library that we like, and then we can jump on and start using it, contributing to it. We're kind of, it's sort of like the group decision making is going to be better than us. Having worked at a few Rails places in the past where they or we have made decisions about how to do something in Rails when there wasn't a convention for it, and then the community came up with a convention that was different, and then we were stuck, and there was no way we were going to be able to rewrite ourselves, and so we got stuck with this weird third-party or in-house, say, job management system. With a couple of places that have weird job management systems that weren't how Ruby people did it. So whenever we hired someone, they were like, "What? Why aren't you using this?" And it's like, "No, we can't change. It's too much effort." And so I'm making sure, I'm trying to make sure we don't get stuck in that track with the UI framework. Convention over configuration is more defined than Ruby.
How did the front-end developers integrate with the live view code base?
How did the front-end developers integrate with the live view? What front-end developers?
If they don't like doing CSS themselves, so
Oh, my colleagues who are great at back-end development also have front-end skills that I don't have. Is the way to put that. Yeah. So our designer just does Figma stuff, and then we're going to take it from there. Yeah. It's definitely, particularly with live view, it's a different way of thinking about it, because you've got to respond really quickly when the user does something, because the page cannot do anything while you're busy thinking about what to do based upon a button click. And that was the biggest mistake we made early on, was not understanding how much of a negative effect that could have. Without getting a little bit too detailed though, so you have a live running process, many live running processes on the server representing the page. So in this case, our nav bar is a process with its own state. It knows how to render itself, and when I change page, that process will through whatever properties in one word is sticky. It stays in memory. It doesn't lose its state. It's just there. And so, how much data you put in its state affects performance a lot. We realized a lot more than we thought it would. So, for instance, this. When it goes away, I forget how big it is, but this line on the screen here, this boundary, we were just keeping that in memory. We were loading that up for our backend process that runs the map, keeping it in memory on the server, and just sending it through. And we were clipping against it because the user could draw the map at various stages. And so, from my performance point of view, it's like, well, why load this like 500K every time the user does something, and we've got to clip a polygon they drew against this boundary so they can't draw it outside it. Yes, we're doing that server side, and that's fine performance-wise. Not using turf.js or anything like that. And that ended up being quite detrimental to performance of the site. So we now just chuck that away once we've finished using that data, and we reload it. The user needs it again. We don't have massively high user rate or anything like that. So we weren't too worried about blowing server memory by everybody with this page open that's using half an is probably the wrong number, but yeah. As you get through, as I'm doing this stuff, part of this was when you change these things, we were holding in memory the current values of all the colors, all the polygons on the server, and then just updating it and sending it through. So part of my perf changes was not holding anything in memory and just like passing it through. So the flow of the data through the system, the form it took, was really important and being really efficient. So if we could get less data from Postgres to begin with, we were transmitting less data around the place. We were having to handle this data, and we're having to process and inspect and all that type of thing. So that was probably the moving where stuff was happening and just having less data was probably the biggest. Still doing it, still got some pages a little bit slow, but it's a good case of don't prematurely optimize. We rewrote the entire product in about 3 months, made so many mistakes, all learning Elixir, all learning LiveView in particular at the same time. And now we're going back, well, I'm going back fixing all those problems as we identify which ones are the important ones that have to be fixed first. And it's, if we had slowed down a bit and learned Elixir properly, it's still learning, we wouldn't have finished rewriting the product yet. And there's a, I forget the exact wording to it, but it's the upshot of the phrase I repeat every now and again is along the lines of, while you're sitting there planning and designing and coming up with the perfect solution, I am bashing something out real quick that's good enough and stealing all your customers that you don't have. And that's kind of that situation. So.
I think I might, yeah, leave it there and we'll get on to Erik Fercak.
Cool. Thank you.
We'll just do the like AddressFinder Q&A and the other stuff, and then we can go back to
Sorry, I got in the way of the recording again. What do you do?
Oh, I can pull the question up.
Yeah.
So I guess like, yeah, it's just a general like AddressFinder Q&A, not necessarily just about Erik's talk, like probably just anything you're curious about AddressFinder or maybe some Abletech stuff as well. And we've got some existing questions, but if you have any, obviously just ask them. And we'll start with the questions we've got. I'll pull.
Yeah, I don't know who Cam is. So,
Yeah, that's not right.
so let's ask Cam to do to demo a 1 hour vlog. So
Yeah.
Okay. Are there seasonal spikes in demand? If so, how do you plan for handling those? I would not say there are seasonal spikes. There are event spikes, or have been in the past. For example, the one that is being talked a lot about is there was a thing in Tasmania where the whole Tasmania just went and searched where they live. Was so it was a Tasmanian government was giving out free something money, I don't know what was
Travel vouchers.
yeah. And the whole Tasmania just went online and registered for that. So that was one thing. And the thing is that we don't get notified about events like that. So what we do is we have good servers that can handle those spikes. So when we do performance testing, it depends on which server it is, because we do have servers in Azure, Amazon, and also a side host. So it's a mix of different hardware from the different CPUs and configuration. So they all perform similarly, but one might be faster than the other slightly. But ballpark figures was 20,000 requests per minute per server is what we can handle. So we are fine now.
There's a lot of money given away.
It's not actually.
It wasn't? No, the Tasmanian government was giving away.
I don't know how.
It was $200 or $300
Oh, okay. So,
towards going on holiday somewhere in Tasmania. If you were a Tasmanian, it turned out it was quite popular.
It's been to be nice. Tasmania.
So yeah.
So you don't use something like auto scale groups?
no, it takes us, let's say, half a day today to spin up a new server, an API server, if you would want to. Yeah. So we don't do that.
What's your average demand if 20,000 is your max limit?
Uh,
So We sort of do about 1,500 requests a minute during the day. That's just like flat stuff, you know. Nothing special happening.
We have clients that patterns like ACC, they do like a big batch every morning. So if you look at our games, you'll see that a lot of requests comes from them. Abletech Pro, the COVID apps for Ministry of Health, where you could order your bags test, and also when you got COVID, where you entered your close contact information, and they were using AddressFinder. And so yeah, those things were also like visible on the graphs, but we did not feel them. We did not feel them yet. Because like the nice thing about our stack is that it's all boring. There's no Kubernetes. It's just Rails apps that are, in case of API servers, it's very read-heavy workload. So if you can get our data set into memory, which we can, then just flies.
What do you use for your memory caching?
There's a lot of RAM. We use Elasticsearch.
Right, okay, you don't do, yeah,
We don't.
you don't have something in front of that.
Chris was trying to convince me that we do, but we couldn't find it.
We do.
We do.
Yeah, we do.
We cache very short queries.
Yeah.
Very short
Yeah,
queries.
okay.
We couldn't find it.
I didn't
Not
know
hard
it.
work for our system.
Yep, yeah.
But
Because
there's
it
lots of-
cinches you type, right? So
Yeah. So if it's like about 6 characters or a few, it gets cached.
So it's
and they're probably not going to find what they're looking for anyway, so it kind of doesn't really matter too much. You just want to show them an interaction and they can keep typing.
6.
That feedback loops.
Yeah. You start getting like useful results after about 5 characters.
Right.
You must spot your address.
So
New Zealand,
In New
not the
Zealand.
country. Maybe in Australia, different story.
If you type 1GH, I think you get Gasni already.
Yeah,
Because
because it's a strange.
yeah, it's very strange function.
We live on 1 Queen Street. Get on.
Hosting or security audits. Just watch the dog, I guess. Hosting. As I said, we try to be geographically close to people who do the queries. So we do have servers in Australia and Sydney, Amazon, and then in New Zealand we have 2 in Auckland. Is Azure in Auckland? Where is Azure?
Yeah,
they're building in New Zealand, aren't they?
Yeah.
Are they here yet?
they're all. I think what is it? We've got Google coming, we've got AWS coming, we've got Azure coming.
they're all
I thought
I think
also that Azure is here.
AWS has an edge here.
Yeah, they've got an edge node.
but that's really just faster internet between here and Sydney. It's just dedicated lines, which you kind of get anyway.
But you can run CloudFront stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can, because CloudFront's running on the edge in Auckland. So if you have CloudFront, what's it called? CloudFront Lambdas or something like that? Lambda at CloudFront. You can run in Auckland.
Lambda and Edge.
Yeah.
You can also get their actual racks and set them up yourself if you wanted to.
Yeah. But perhaps a step too far.
Yeah, it's very expensive.
And then we do use side host for to rent your hardware in Auckland. So if in case one provider goes down, we do use Route 53. Also, okay, if Route 53 goes down, then you're screwed. But if it doesn't go down, yeah, we have DNS payload basically, or not payload. We have health checks that would take a broken server out of DNS. Ranking of or are there any questions about the hosting? Cool. Ranking of the returned results. We rely on Elasticsearch to do its magic to rank the results. we double checked with Case today just to make sure.
So you don't do anything like saying, if you're asking for Queen Street, we'll give you Auckland first, then Wellington, Christchurch, or
No,
does it just, does its magic and you get a result back?
plus it's mentioned. I would, like our queries have some things in them. For example, only X% of filters have to be valid for this result to be returned and so on. So if people search for something very specific and they use fuzzy search, we can bend the rules a little, for example, but it's not related to sorting of the results. We don't try to be smart about where you are typing from. Like, so let's say if we would somehow the widget would say your GPS coordinates, we don't try to sort by proximity to your current location.
Because it's just a bit spooky to ask for GPS coordinates. Although that said, you're probably typing in your own address, and we're about to find out.
That's why I never put my own address in. It's even my neighbours or.
That's one house.
It's like,
How do you then get? No,
was it in terms of like what are my internet options? Right? I don't actually need to put my house in. I just need to put one roughly my area that's connected to the same exchange.
So you want to see if it's like, oh, my neighbour 3 doors down gets it.
Yeah.
You order up. No, you can't have it.
Just curious to see. Just curious to see how it works.
How often do you update your address database?
Monthly.
Monthly.
So we have multiple sources of data in New Zealand and Australia, and we do have an Elixir app that we just spin up a beefy server and just let it just eat all the data and spit out like one unified set by country.
We update monthly, but Post doesn't. So there's 2 data sources in Australia. So one of them does get updated monthly, but not everything gets updated as often as we do. Some of it gets updated quarterly or whenever it gets updated. So.
Yeah, we've got behind what I showed you on our site is a massive data processing pipeline. Some of it is curated at the moment, but we've got just me on the web app at the moment. We've got 5 or 6 or 7 engineers trying to automate the data processing just to power the web app. It's like totally insane, and we need to be able to arbitrarily update it whenever we get a new data source in for a small segment of the database. It's a small geographical area. And that's all in Python because it's all GIS stuff.
What's it? Data's Python.
Sorry?
Data's generated Python.
It was, I don't know, or correct me, but the builder was, we call the app that builds the data builder, and it was written in Rails or Ruby. And what was the difference? You said that it was like, I think it took an hour to run in Rails or Ruby. Written in Elixir it was seconds, but before it's broken.
Yeah. So when we were trying out Elixir for the first time, yeah, we had a bit of a go at like writing some code to like perform an equivalent function, and it was incredibly fast. It was sort of, I think we're basically comparing like close to an hour worth of like doing this thing, and we had it imported in like 37 seconds. And I did not believe it. I had to go looking in the database, and then I still didn't really believe it. I deleted the database and ran the thing again, and like the data was there, and it's like, how on earth is that possible? That's because Elixir was able to. We built it so there was a lot of concurrency there. So there was a lot of like concurrent operations happening. And when you do that, it's really quick.
Did you go back and try triggering it the same way with the Druid?
No.
Because I've done it, there's a good concurrency, there's a couple of good concurrencies.
I mean, we did. I mean, whenever you rewrite something, you always learn from what we did last time. And we could have brought it back, but we built it for New Zealand first, which has like a much smaller data set. I think we've got about 2 million addresses in New Zealand. But we were actually really building it for Australia, which we end up creating 200 million addresses because Australia has a lot of address aliases. So there's about, I think it's about 18 million addresses in Australia, but like, when we do the aliasing, it basically blows it out by a factor of 10. And like, yeah, Ruby was never going to work for us for the Australian data set. We could have got a good outcome for New Zealand.
Sorry, what do you mean by like address aliases? Like,
So
Can I just make up a street name and register it and then have like
no.
4 Whittle Street?
So you know how like let's say you live in Wellington and like you'd really like to, for example, live in Kandala, but you actually live like just outside the boundary of Kandala. You live in
North
suburbs. Yeah.
Well,
Maybe Broadmeadows or something like that. But you like to type on your address, I live da 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 Kandala. So what the Australia Post data set in particular basically has a list of all these kind of vanity suburbs, so that people can kind of you can type in your address in Kandala and you select it. We go, well, actually, your problems.
We'll go out change it back to the green suburbs.
Yeah. But they also have, there's a lot of history too about streets that perhaps have had a name change or maybe a spelling correction.
All no addresses as well will have like
Yeah,
two addresses.
Yeah.
Often.
they might have had the mailbox on one side, they moved it to the other, but they retain that alias. So say if you send us address there, it's actually there. Which can confuse people a little bit when they type an address, it might get totally a different one. I mean, it's fine if you live there because you know the history of the place, but typing somebody else's address and get another one. Say about then you go look at Google Maps and actually actually right there. It's the same house.
What was the thing that bloated our data set? Was it synonyms?
Yeah, we have synonyms for
It's saying post, right?
yeah,
so
there's a post, yeah. They just added a bunch of synonyms. I think it's like misspellings and things like that.
but yeah, and that through our database.
I think it was suburb synonyms, and since each suburb does that thing where you create multiple aliases because of the neighboring suburb. If each suburb had 3 spellings, then all of the neighboring suburbs get like that many more.
Terms.
Yeah, it goes up very quickly.
Then they reverted it next time.
Yeah, they did.
That's the well, complex. Any other questions? Can be about addresses.
If I had your AWS account keys and like completely hosed your whole account, like close the account, how long would it take for you to like bring AddressFinder back up?
It would be still. Like we don't rely on Amazon.
Okay, sorry. Wherever you're hosting.
What's your DR? How
Like,
How quickly will
say
we-
I take a hammer to your servers and wherever they are, and imagine you can just get a new server like that. How long is it going to take you to bring it back up?
That's the slowness of the process is building the data set.
Yeah.
So if we would have those, if you would have access to our S3 buckets, then I don't know. Running, we use Cloud 66 for it's like a UI for deployments. We use Capistrano.
We also back up the database in 2 places as well, the data set.
You said servers, not data. So. Yeah, it's just copying the data, getting the first deploy out. I don't know how long it takes to copy the data. I would say if everything goes well, which with Cloud 66, we find out every time we spin up a new server, something else kind of breaks and we have to come back and support. But if everything goes well, I would say 2 hours.
But we intentionally have a lot of redundancy. So we choose to have service with Amazon, but we intentionally have service with other providers as well. Because there was like this big storm in Sydney, like for about 4 years ago, and like one of the availability zones got harvested. And like in theory, like you build your system and you put it in different availability zones. It turns out most Amazon customers don't do that. So actually the other availability zones were just like haywire, network traffic going everywhere. And it was very kind of sporadic sort of service levels. But this all happened kind of like in the middle of
the
the
APIs disappear at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So this all happened in the middle of the night.
A long time ago.
And we, about 4 years ago, maybe 5.
The flywheel.
But our health checks basically kind of realized there was a problem. Just took those servers out of the pool, and we at that time we had a server in California. That one basically just kept on going, and it was a really good story to tell. And I guess we were just lucky that we weren't like totally with one vendor. So since then we've kept our redundancy on both on vendor, country, and on city.
Because they do ghost zones as well. Like when they say they have free availability zones, they actually have 4.
Oh, really?
Yeah, or at least they do now. That might not have been the case 4 years ago, but they do and have done for the last 2 years at least.
So, which one's number 4? Or how's that work?
Well, sometimes you
There's a
can
different.
notice you might end up on one of the other ones, like, and when you get switched off, you'll see it kind of like, yeah.
But that's crazy if you have multiple accounts and you think that if you put services in those different accounts on the same zones that they can communicate faster.
Yeah, so
I B and C are different for each customer.
Yeah, you might end up with like one that sits in B, which is not a different customer.
If you really look at some of the fields, you
You
can see
can't
the
figure it
actual underlying one, but like whenever you say I want AZ1B, you know, that's the friendly name, but there's an underlying like code for XDP. It's like that's called.
It's for that exact reason. Like if you lose a whole availability zone at once, you still need to be able to put up a whole availability zone. So yeah.
So,
And everybody always chooses the best one. So.
yeah.
Randomize the selects.
Yeah.
So by us choosing availability zone 2C, just thinking that's the quiet one.
And it's
That's
not
not
like
okay.
2 cents. 2 cents different for everyone. Yeah.
No die customers.
Yeah. How about that?
Yeah, I guess that's it.
All right. Yeah. Any Java things or anything? Able to.
You're looking for a job.
Yeah, some of my colleagues on their own, but just in general, who's hiring, who's wanting to be hired.
Yeah, Rafa Global. I'm the Chief Technology Officer. We're hiring Rails developers, or any developers really that are interested in Rails. That's fine. Yeah, we're not really tied to tech. Expense management software, payments, invoicing, automation, data.
How do you differ from Zero?
Zero kind of is more of an ERP system, so they're like the thing that runs your general ledger code. And I mean, they technically have an expensing software, which is they bought, which is more like kind of OCR. So you know they're doing OCR on receipts to try and work them out, which is fine, and we do that as well. But what we do is a lot of direct integration, so that rather than printing out a receipt that you then run OCR on and try and figure it out and get it wrong most of the time, direct integration means we can get the full line-by-line information and put it all together. But also on a lot bigger scale, Zero as well, because they're kind of targeted at like a 50 user base, where like we can do small companies, but we also like enterprise, government level stuff. Yeah. Global.
Yeah. Cool.
I'm just looking for .NET jobs, but
I guess yeah, for the upcoming meetups, we don't have anything planned. Hoping to maybe have something like kind of every second month or so. We're still trying to figuring out, but if you're interested in doing a talk or know a company or work at a company that could host and pay for pizza and drinks and things, that'd be really great. Like reach out to myself or Alex, who may or may not still be online. Yeah, basically wanting to try and keep this thing going, but it also takes a lot of effort to kind of organize everything. So that's why I'm kind of thinking if we drop it down to a little bit less frequently, and yeah, hope that everyone can pitch in and give some talks and yeah, give us different companies to host it. It'll be good. See how we can keep going with this. So, yeah, I think that's everything I've really got. Yeah. But, cool. Thanks all for coming.